A heart transplant is now a routine operation. But a number of patients who have received new hearts are reporting huge changes in their tastes, personality, and most extraordinarily, in their memories. They believe that they've been given much more than they bargained for from their donors. The heart has been seen for centuries as a symbolic organ associated with love and emotion. Today, new science is testing this theory, that the heart is involved in our feelings, that it is intelligent and can sometimes lead the brain in our interpretation of the world around us.
From our research, I've come to say that I think the poets and the great scholars have been right all along. The heart plays a particularly unique role in our experience of emotion.
So is our heart just an organ to pump blood, or could it be much more? The first patient to report a change in personality was Claire Sylvia from Boston in the United States. 20 years ago, she was the first person at New Haven Hospital to receive a heart and lung transplant. The operation was a success.
It was very weird to see my heart on the machine, giving me the beat and hearing it. It was a whole new rhythm, a whole new feeling. And little did I know that my journey was just beginning. It was a couple of days after the surgery that the press came in to interview me, and one of the reporters asked, "Now that you've had this miracle, what do you want more than anything in the world?" And I said, "I'd die for a beer right now." It just came from me, and I'm not a beer drinker, and I was a little mortified by my flip answer to such a profound question. So that was my first happening, and little by little many things started happening till I was really feeling convinced that I was living with the presence of another within me.
We must travel on, man. La, 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 la.
The first thing that happened were the food preference changes. Suddenly, like green peppers, finding them, putting them in my food, I used to take them out. And the first time they allowed me to drive, I found myself going to a Kentucky Fried Chicken place to buy chicken nuggets, something I never did before. I found that my handwriting, instead of going from right to left, it was going from left to right. And these things were sneaking up on me, little by little.
Like most heart transplant recipients, no detail was revealed to Claire about her donor. All she was told was that her heart had come from a young man who had died in a motorcycle accident.
It wasn't until a few months after the transplant that I had a dream in which I'm with a young man. I awakened from the dream feeling that this for certain was my donor. And in the dream, his name, I knew him as Tim L. So I called the transplant coordinator, told her about the dream, and asked her if that was his name. Well, there was a moment of silence, and she said, "Please don't pursue this."
Remarkably, the donor's name was Tim Lamarand. What's more, he loved beer and green peppers. Chicken nuggets were found in his motorcycle jacket when he died. It was only when she finally met her donor family that she pieced everything together, giving her confirmation that everything she was experiencing had extraordinary similarities to her donor.
The family of my heart verified all the experience I was having, and they were hungry to get anything they could from me about Tim that I was remembering from his memories that were coming through me.
With strict codes of confidentiality in place at the hospital, it was impossible for Claire to have known these details about her donor. So where could these memories have come from? Professor Paul Pearsall is a cardioneurologist from the University of Honolulu. He first encountered stories like Claire's whilst recovering in hospital from a bone marrow transplant.
I had a bone marrow transplant for stage 4 cancer in the very early 80s. And I was on the transplant unit. And we would sit down at night all of us who were dying, and most of us were, and talk about things. And the heart transplant recipients were reporting receiving the memories, feelings, food preferences, fears, musical preferences of their donor. One woman who got the heart of a boxer was the most quiet, demure, easygoing woman, hated violence, left the room when her husband would watch football. She's got this heart of the boxer, now she watches football and yells and swears and punches and everything. So that's when I started hearing all these remarkable stories, and I started to collect every single one I could.
Could the transplanted heart be bringing with it some kind of information from its previous owner? We know that the heart is a hugely energetic organ and is in constant communication with the brain. 40,000 neurons, or nerve cells in the heart, communicate up to the brain. Hormones from the heart travel in our bloodstream, and every time the heart beats, it creates a pulse wave. But most impressive of all is our heart's magnetic energy, 5,000 times more powerful than the brain. It can be measured up to 6 feet away from our bodies.
I thought, this heart is just as powerful, more powerful, and does talk to the brain. Maybe we should be paying attention to that. Maybe the brain, even though it thinks it's us, isn't.
If you look at the content carefully, you will discover that the degree of coincidence is too detailed. For example, there's a case that we describe of a man 47 years old, and he received the heart of a 17-year-old black young man. And he was not racist, but he had a lot of biases about what he expected of young black men, including the fact that if he was going to pick up anything from them, he would be afraid, for example, that he might be picking up rap music. However, after he received the transplant, of the various changes that he experienced is he had a profound change in his preference for music. He became obsessed with classical music. He began listening to it over and over. He began singing melodies, classical melodies to songs he hadn't heard. His wife was thoroughly confused. Only later was it learned that the young boy was actually leaving his violin lessons because he was a classical violinist, and he was hit by a car. That kind of information is not the kind of information that you just get with a random assortment of fears or changes in simple preferences.
Some heart transplant recipients feel a change so profound they are battling with a complete transformation. Bill Wohl from Phoenix, Arizona, had a heart transplant 5 years ago. His change after the operation was dramatic.
I couldn't have been luckier because I got a fantastic donor, someone super healthy, handsome leading man, good looks, and the fun began.
Bill felt he was being driven by a completely new personality. Previously a successful and hard-working businessman, he put his career aside and began a new life. Dr. Jack Copeland was his transplant surgeon.
Within months, the man was transformed into an athlete. We had very little idea that this was going to happen to him, but it did. He started cycling, he started working out, he started swimming.
Just months after his operation, Bill began training excessively. But it wasn't until a full year later, when he met his donor family, that he found out that he had developed remarkable parallels to his donor.
I know on certain things that I had no interest or whatever in before. It had to come from somewhere, and it makes sense to me, and I truly believe that it came from my donor.
Brady, Bill's donor, was a Hollywood stuntman. It was only when Bill met his donor family that his new interests seemed to make sense. He is convinced that he has inherited many personality traits through his donor's heart. The researchers at the Institute of Heart Math set out to design an experiment to investigate the heart's role in processing emotional information.
What we found was that the heart is by far the most accurate part of our body that reflects how we're feeling. Our heart is literally beating out different messages that is strongly correlated with our emotional state. It's a scientific fact, even though a lot of people don't know this, that the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. It's like a radio transmitter works. The heart radiates very strong fields, and the heart is the strongest rhythmic source of electromagnetic fields in the body. And with today's equipment, we can measure the magnetic field of the heart 6 feet away from the body. Probably it goes farther, but that's the sensitivity of the equipment we have now.
They began investigating the heart's role in our experience of feeling and emotion.
Some of our more recent research, where we're looking at I call it the electrophysiology of intuition, are indicating that the heart really is connected to some other, I call it field of information.
In the experiment, subjects were shown photographs chosen to cause extreme emotions, both positive and negative. They were selected at 6-second intervals at random. They recorded the physiology of brain and heart activity.
What we found is in that what we call pre-stimulus period, before they saw the photograph, that both the heart and the brain would react differently. That the heart was shifting, it was changing, before the brain was.
According to McCraty, the experiment shows that the heart is behaving intuitively. Remarkably, the heart registers an anticipatory response before a disturbing image appears on screen and sends a message directly to the emotional centers of the brain. The brain then prepares the body to take action.
This was even a surprise to us, that the heart was plugged into this type of information even before the brain.
Where all this leads, according to McCraty, is to a suggestion that the brain doesn't have an exclusive role in information processing.
It's quite plausible then that if we transplant a heart from one person to another, that transplanted heart is connected to that field of information from the person that they got that heart from. And it feels like there's somebody else inside them.